Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining the Clallam County EDC Coffee Chat, Coffee with Colleen. We are very happy today to have Heather on with us from the Washington State Achievement Council. And it's an entity within the government, state government, and I will let her, of course, talk about that. She does have some slides to share. We will have this recorded and up on our website later today. And so you can share it with other folks that you think it might be valuable for them to watch. So if you have questions, please either put them in the chat or go ahead and raise your hand and we'll call on you, and so you can answer your questions about Heather's presentation. So Heather, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And we also really appreciate you coming out, the whole team coming out last month. Was it December? When we came out in person?
I think it was October.
Oh gosh, I think you're right. No, I think it was November 6th. Now that I think about it.
Okay. Early. Okay. It was before all of the holidays, is all I know.
Yeah. Yeah. Big group came out, and you guys held your board meeting in Port Angeles. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Yeah, it was great.
Met with Susie and her team. So we really do appreciate that. So with that, I'm going to pass it on over to you and you can start sharing your slides.
Great. Sounds good. I'll actually give the kind of WSAC who we are piece before I go into sharing my slides. Heather Hudson, I'm the Director of External Affairs with the Washington Student Achievement Council, and our acronym is WSAC, the Washington Student Achievement Council. It's not, the easiest thing to roll off your tongue, but we were essentially created with a mission and a charge around the statewide post-secondary attainment goal, which is what I will predominantly focus on for my time today. But from the perspective of a state agency, we are part of the governor's executive cabinet. We have a governor-appointed council that has representation from our two-year community technical colleges, our public four-year institutions, our private not-for-profit institutions, and the superintendent of OSPI for K-12, in addition to other governor appointees. And our agency is charged with some programmatic administrative functions. Most people know us for administering state financial aid, which is, again, a theme that I'll be talking throughout today. Most notably is the Washington College Grant. There's several other financial aid programs that we administer. And we're also charged with administering the state savings plans of 529 Dream Ahead, as well as GET, Guaranteed Education Tuition. Increasingly, we also do quite a bit on research, policy development. We do some consumer protection. We have the student loan advocate, and we have some, statewide services that we do to help people on the ground around post-secondary access and completion around FAFSA. So that's kind of the agency in a nutshell. We're pretty small. We're like just about 100 employees. So we're not like employment security department. So when you pick up the phone and want to talk to somebody at WSAC, you usually actually can get somebody to talk to, which is always, I think, a shock to people when they work with state agency. But really happy to have a continued conversation. As Colleen shared, we were out on the Olympic Peninsula in Port Angeles when our council met back in early November, and our focus is to continue to learn and connect with regional partnerships and folks on the ground like yourselves to better understand our role as a state agency and state partner towards our post-secondary attainment goal. So that's what I'll jump into now and share my screen. Can folks see the screen? Yeah, okay, great. So this is a snapshot of the statewide 70% post-secondary attainment goal, you can see we are below our goal of 70%. One thing that's important to note is many people think, oh, college, you're just focused on four-year colleges or two-year college degrees. We consider the post-secondary attainment goal to be inclusive of things like workforce certificates, registered apprenticeships. We're really trying to expand our understanding of what are those post-secondary credentials that are aligned to what industry needs and what are those that are valuable in today's economy. So that's an ongoing conversation that we're still trying to learn more around how we capture that information. But when you listen and we discuss later, throughout this time, just keep that in mind. It's not exclusive to just a certain type of a college credential.
So, Heather, I don't know if you'll get into this further, but I'd love to talk a little bit about apprenticeships at some point, and the challenges we have with apprenticeships out here.
Sure.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm sure that's something that you'll talk about, but so I'll let you go on with your presentation.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'll keep that in mind and weave that in a few points. So I mean, I would say that this frame up here is what our council has adopted as our 4 strategies to meet our post-secondary attainment goal. The upper left, affordability, is where Washington is the strongest. And I will talk about why we are so strong as a state when it comes to making post-secondary education affordable. The other 3 areas are where we are learning and growing. We've recognized that financial aid alone, making college, post-secondary education, these options affordable is not the only thing that will help somebody go onto this path. So increasingly, we're much more focused on what besides covering the costs do people need in order to enroll. We're trying to learn more about these other areas that increasingly are a barrier, like access to affordable housing and access to transportation and childcare, which we deem our student supports cluster. And then ultimately is, well, what does it take for somebody to actually earn that credential? And beyond even earning the credential is how do we think about that completion outcome of getting a job or being able to have increased earnings after they've earned a credential. Of course, we have an equity lens as an agency and as a council that we're particularly focused on racial equity, income inequality, and so that's embedded throughout our strategies. The other thing, the last thing I'll just say is this regional partnership approach that I mentioned at the top, that we don't see ourselves as having the answers for everything as a state agency, and we see the value of local regional communities as being integral to this change agenda. So I'll talk a little bit about the affordability piece for our state, because that is, again, the strongest area. And a lot of people still don't understand or know about what we have as a state when it comes to financial aid. So this just shows you with our statewide Washington College Grant, the level of awards. The way that the Washington College Grant works is it is a guarantee. The state forecasts this amount of money based off of a projected enrollment, and that funding is guaranteed for individuals. In 2019, that was not the case. Previously, it was called the State Need Grant. There was always this gap of people that did not have access. What you're looking at here is showing that over the past few years, as well as showing that the MFI levels, meaning family income by which we determine that income eligibility, has been shifted up. So it's more generous now, and that a family with up to 60% MFI, they're getting that full award, which covers tuition and fees for our public 2-year, public 4-year, a registered apprenticeship. It covers that full cost, a full award. If you have an income that is a little bit above, then you would be able to still get something, but it would be more of a partial award that would stack in with, let's say, maybe an institutional scholarship or a merit scholarship or something else. And then usually people that are getting a full award of Washington College Grant, they're also often getting Pell. So this just gives you a snapshot of some of the ways in which Washington College Grant fits into the recipients of our state. Recently, you may have seen the governor's office just announced in partnership with WSAC that we are ranked #1 in the nation for our need-based financial aid. So again, you might hear, oh, well, Tennessee has the best financial aid. They have a promise, or this other place has a promise. Washington's state financial aid is designed from a need-based perspective. Who needs help paying for college? And shorthand. That's the way that our financial aid was designed. And so that income-based eligibility determination is very progressive and advanced because it helps you kind of target in instead of covering costs for those families that may not necessarily need the help. And we're ranked highest in the kind of total award package that we give. So that's just a kind of fun, exciting new news release that was shared. So I wanted to point that out.
That's great. Heather, question for you. Can you go
Sure.
back 2 slides?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I see there that, so the number of partial awards from 2021 to 2022 went down. And my guess is that's because of the number of people that applied overall, and not surprising because that was COVID. But then as we were getting out of COVID, it seemed it went down much more, down to 20,980. What's behind that statistic?
Well, there's 2 things. One is that the full awards went up.
Okay.
So you can see that our full awards did have a dip during the pandemic, but then they've bounced back up to 70.
Okay.
The other thing is that the MFI level went up.
Median family income?
Correct. So we went from, you had to be a family at 55%, you got the max award, to up to 60%. So we said more generous. So a family that makes about $100,000 a year for a family of 4, they can get something. But we expanded the level of income earners to be able to get the full award covered. And that meant more money went towards that first. And more people were taking advantage of it. I actually was just going to go into that slide about what is the relationship between state financial aid and enrollment. But I would say that some of this is also recognizing there's not a direct causation. That's basically what people need to understand, is that yes, we have seen financial aid positively impact our enrollment growth. So what we saw is that for people who received Washington College Grant, we saw enrollment actually go up by 10% at our 4-year public institutions. And we saw it mitigated for those at our CTC schools. So the decline was way less for those that got aid than those that did not at our CTCs in both scenarios. So it's very likely that state financial aid had something to do with it, but it's not necessarily a direct causation that we could say, you know, well, if you get the aid, then you're 100% going to go, or, you know, millions more people than went because of the aid. We think there's something there. We see that in the data, but it is kind of back to the first point that I made. The financial aid alone is not the singular driver for people going back to enroll in post-secondary education. And I think for this group, like Colleen, the conversation that we had around the industry component, the value of post-secondary education, that is increasingly a big part of, if people are getting paid more with their employer, it's hard to make that decision. Well, it makes sense for me to go back to school and pay for, you know, even the price tag of a college, even if they don't know that they have that tuition and fees covered. There's some decision-making that has to go into making sure that somebody would like to, you know, make that commitment, I guess.
Okay. And this is for anyone of any age that's graduated from high school, is that right?
Well, it's for any age. So Washington College Grant is not exclusively for high school graduates. So it is available for people that have, you're up to age 50, 40, 30, and you graduated from high school 10 years ago and you just never got your associate's or master's or college degree. So it is not exclusive. And to your point about registered apprenticeships, so Washington College Grant does cover the costs of registered apprenticeship. We didn't break that out in this slide. We have a lot more data, but I chose to kind of give you just a little bit. That way we could tease up a conversation and then figure out if there's any follow-up data. We're happy to do that afterwards.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. So I think I
with
only have a few more slides. Was there another question on this one?
Well, with apprenticeships, most of the cost, registered apprenticeships, falls on the employer, not on the employee. And is there any money that goes to an employer?
Not in the financial aid that we administer. I think that is a good question for a broader group of folks, that are involved in expanding registered apprenticeships and supporting the employer to be able to get that started. Because I know there's startup fees to get that going. This financial aid goes directly to the recipient. So to cover things like materials, if they need to like purchase boots or some transportation, it's not exclusively an academic related cost that is being covered with the financial aid.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yep. So just kind of going on the thread around the relationship between enrollment and financial aid. We've been really focused, I think in every conversation, this is a slide that we always come back to. This is the slide that shows us how stagnant enrollment has been and what happened during the pandemic to see what we're facing. The reality is we saw a really deep decline, particularly for our community and technical colleges, that we believe we are coming back from. We started to see enrollments come back. But the question of whether or not we will bounce back to where we were at before and how long we will be able to then sustain increased enrollment with kind of the current policies and investments and business models of our higher ed institutions, I think is an ongoing conversation that we're having with folks. But this slide, I think it shows us what happened during the pandemic, and it shows that, wasn't all of a sudden that enrollment went down. We were seeing enrollment stagnant and going down for a while.
So some colleges are a whole lot more expensive than others. And so do you also provide funding to students that have been accepted to private universities? Or is it tapped out at a certain level?
No, it's guaranteed at the independent colleges of Washington, the non-for-profit. So, the Whitmans and Whitworths, those institutions, PLU, those are all eligible. And even some for-profit institutions are eligible for Washington College Grant as well. And that list is all up on our website. I'm happy to follow up with that if that's helpful.
And so it stops at 4-year degrees. If someone wanted to go to medical school, it's not that they could apply for these funds?
Right, yeah. So this is exclusive for 2-year degree or 4-year degree. So if you already have your master's, it's not available. It is predominantly focused on that undergraduate credential, but inclusive of 2-year workforce certificate, things like that.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah. So this is really the last slide that moves in the conversation from financial aid and enrollment to what are the other strategies that the state is working on and that we're exploring to try and increase our post-secondary enrollment. So I'll talk predominantly about this first one of auto eligibility and then hope to open it up for a broader discussion. Right now, we've been working on getting a bill passed through the legislature that is focused on enabling those enrolled in our SNAP, our food benefit program, to determine that they are also eligible for the Washington College Grant. The reason we've been focused on this is that, well, first of all, we actually did get a bill passed a few years ago that did it. So it's in law already, but it's only for a few small state programs that don't really have a, education age bracket. They're like 6 years and older, 60 years and older. So we've been focused on a few things, which is people we know often are resistant to filing a FAFSA. The FAFSA or the WASF, the state financial aid form or the federal financial aid form, that's the way that people get state financial aid. That's the way you get your federal financial aid. And it's a complex form, and many people don't want to put their information in and give it to the government. The federal government has been simplifying it. Maybe you've heard they just rolled out this simplified FAFSA form. There's a little bit of bumps and hiccups on the way, but from what we can tell, it is going to be easier. The issue is there's still going to be people that are resistant to it. And it kind of ties back into that conversation of, I see a sticker price. Maybe I haven't had anybody in my family go to school. Maybe it just sounds hard, so it's not even worth it. And so this approach is both a mechanical procedural way, but is more important is the powerful message that would be enabled, is to be able to communicate to people when they're in 10th grade that they're eligible for tuition and fees to be covered at our institutions, tell them that in 10th grade, and then work with them later to file a FAFSA to get any additional aid. So that is a strategy that we've been deploying, and we're very interested in exploring other ways in which we can get to people earlier that are eligible for Washington College Grant and make sure they know about it, make sure that it's easy for them to access, and help them understand the value and what that Washington College Grant can do for them. Because oftentimes, again, people think, oh, grant, it only goes to a 4-year college. No, it can cover your welding program. It can cover, your manufacturing certificate. So it does have this range that a lot of people are not familiar with. So I wanted to lead with that as one of our more innovative strategies that has gaining some national attention. We are always in conversation with local partners to figure out what we could do to, if there's local partners that are interested in partnering with us on it. It comes down to some data sharing agreements, but I know we've been in conversation with Western Washington University to do this with a few high schools there, and are exploring that with other institutions right now. So I'll pause on that, and then, happy to go into conversation a little bit more.
Question for you about timing. How long does it take to get funding from WSAC? What if, are there deadlines that annual that you have to apply by X time, or is it more open than that?
Well, just one important note is that we don't give the funding directly to students. We give it to the institutions. Institutions have their financial aid administrators, and they're the ones that are packaging and delivering the funding to those students. The traditional timeline for a traditional K-12 student is that they file their FAFSA their 12th grade year, and they're applying to schools their 12th grade year. We are reversing or flipping that with this approach to say, because, and it's a little confusing, but when you file your FAFSA in your 12th grade year, you're using income data from a few years prior. And so we would be able to determine that income eligibility based off the tax year information to tell students and families in 10th grade. Whereas the traditional way is, yes, not until your 12th grade year, you find out, oh, I've got something covered as you're also applying to schools.
So isn't it the parents, though, that usually apply for the FAFSA? I know I did it with my kids, and it was a miserable experience.
Well, parent information, if the kid is a dependent, you need the parent family income. That's not the case for everybody. But yes. parent income is required on there.
Mhm.
Colleen, I just filled it out last week.
How is the
Yeah.
new form?
It crashes. They're having a lot of problems. But the bottom line is you don't have to put all those tax form issues in anymore. You just say, I approve. But yet it only takes 1 year, 2 years ago. So if you had a bump in income that year, you're screwed. Anyway, and they're not able to get it to the colleges in time with the deadline of today. So it might get delayed, from what I understand.
Yeah. There is a delay.
Heather, I'm glad that they're trying to make it easy because I had a similar experience. It's pretty challenging when I first filled it out. Is there any other support, like anyone you could reach out to kind of navigate through the FAFSA?
Yeah.
Yes, there is.
Well, go ahead, Susie.
I was going to say, Peninsula College has multiple staff dedicated to helping people fill out the FAFSA. Our staff are particularly, we got a special allocation from the state to help high school students. And then there's also an employee, you might have met Kennedy through the Clallam County United Way, and also West Sound STEM Network. So there's a lot of folks in our community ready to help people fill out the FAFSA, but I would start at the Peninsula College Financial Aid Office, and we can absolutely get people help. Heather, there's a question in chat that's kind of related to this about a child that can't include their parents' income that might be relevant to this part of the conversation.
Let's see.
Oh, and I didn't see Rick's question. How are student loans?
Rick's question was regarding that first slide
Okay.
with the goals.
Yeah, who set the 70% goal, I guess?
Okay.
And why? What's the basis for that goal?
Sure. Just to wrap up the question on the best option for students that are under 24. I would say go talk to the people at Peninsula College, or I'm happy to follow up with a particular contact from the agency. We have something, I didn't speak to it, but under our technology strategy, we have something called OtterBot, which is this AI texting tool. And so that's actually available to anybody. You just can go in there and ask a question. So we've been using it predominantly for students under our college bound scholarship, but I would say go talk to the people at Peninsula College, and then I'm happy to follow up with those specific technical folks. Let me go back.
Just to clarify, Heather, we've got two superintendents on with us,
Okay. Great.
Marty and Regan. And so do either of the high schools and either of the school districts, any of the school districts have support for that? Or is it specifically for Peninsula College? And what if the student doesn't want to go to PC? What if they have, plans for some other kind of an apprenticeship or a 4-year degree? Can they still go to PC to get help?
The Peninsula College staff that we have, we got a special allocation from the state to hire 3 employees, and they're not dedicated to Peninsula College future students. In fact, we don't even, as we work with them, we don't even track them in our future student customer service relationship software. We really treat them as separate. It's more like a community service. So we'll help you fill out the FAFSA no matter where you want to go.
That's great. And as long as you're in Jefferson or Clallam counties, or could Carol contact you and have you help?
Yeah, for sure. So what happened? So 2 years ago, the legislature looked at the 3 lowest educational service districts in the state for FAFSA completion. And ESD, what is it, 115? Is that ours? Which covers parts of Kitsap, 14?
114.
Okay, so that covers parts of Kitsap, Clallam, and Jefferson County. So Olympic College got some money to hire people, and Peninsula College got some money to hire some people to cover that entire ESD. And then there's 2 other ESDs in the state that also got money. It's a pilot program, and there's now a Senate bill going through the legislature right now to potentially expand that statewide. I testified on it last week to say we saw some huge successes in that. I just want to give a shout out to the Sequim school districts. Reagan's on the phone. Reagan's team gave our staff member an office at Sequim High School, which sounds like a minor thing, but it allowed our staff member to have a private confidential space, some predictability. We were able to set up regular office hours so the students and the parents knew when we were going to be there. And it just was one more contributing factor to building those relationships. And so out of all the high schools that we worked with all of them across Colleen and Jefferson. Sequim had the highest percentage increase this past year of FAFSA completion. And we think it's because of the real partnership that the staff at the high school created with our team. So we're excited to spread that word across the rest of the region to hopefully model that program. Sorry to steal your talk, Heather.
No. Happy to have you sharing. Better to have that.
Yeah, that's great. And so are you hoping you can expand that to other high schools in the 2-county region?
Well, so we are working with every high school in Colleen and Jefferson County for FAFSA completion. The model at Sequim, where they actually give us an office, that would be amazing if other high schools had the capacity to do that. But even if they don't, our folks have gotten pretty savvy at just traveling on the road with their laptop and a little portable printer, ideally. And, it just makes it a little bit more logistically challenging, but we're pretty confident the pilot's going to continue and hopeful that the bill gets passed this session, that then every community across the state would have this benefit.
Great. And so how is the WAFSA, the Washington, is it as difficult as the FAFSA form?
What I would say is that the WASFA has predominantly been focused on meeting the students who are undocumented. So
Okay.
we have a much smaller pool of people that tend to use the WASFA. And it is predominantly modeled like the FAFSA for consistency purposes, but it's, the state version of it. So, I guess I would say we do our best to simplify it to the extent that we can and still collect the necessary information with state systems that are, not necessarily much better than the federal government all the time.
So fun fact on the WAFSA, with the 3 pilot programs this past year, we saw an 80% increase in WAFSA completion. So that's a game changer for our community members who need the WAFSA because they're undocumented and they just would not have had the wherewithal to be able to fill out these complex forms without somebody walking through them side by side.
Yeah. It's great. I want to write that down.
So Lena had another really good question. How are student loans considered when evaluating for SNAP? Yeah, because the poor people need, if they're getting student aid, is that going to harm their ability to continue to get basic food benefits?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I understood that question. Was it in relationship to SNAP or relationship to Washington College Grant?
The SNAP benefits.
I cannot speak to the SNAP benefits because we don't administer SNAP. All I can speak to is that in our proposal to align Washington College Grant with SNAP, the Washington College Grant would come first. So you're enrolled in SNAP. Actually, federal Pell would come first, but you'd have to file the FAFSA. And our theory is we want to tell people before they file a FAFSA, in case they don't file a FAFSA, we want to tell them that they're eligible and then work with them after the fact. So I don't think I can speak to the relationship between student loans and SNAP, but if I understand the question is like, would a student loan or being able to get financial aid, would that impact your ability to receive SNAP? It doesn't count against your income. A financial aid award doesn't count as income. So it's just covering, again, that cost of that tuition.
So you're thinking that student loans, this is something that I'm dealing with both of my kids, because neither of them are working. They're both in school. Well, they're kind of working, or my daughter has been working, but she's not in Washington. But I was just curious as to how that relates for financial aid. And, you know, the other thing I'm not sure about is health insurance, you know, which I know is outside of the scope. But how is student loan, the ability to obtain student loans, how does that impact your ability to get other benefits?
Yeah, well, just again, to be really, really clear, the Washington College Grant is not a loan. So for 99.9% of anything I've talked about today has nothing to do with the actual loan for colleges that I know many are burdened and saddled with. We're talking about being able to get a grant that you will have to cover tuition and fees. And that is not counted as income. So it shouldn't count against any other public benefit programs. The issue that we see is that when you're enrolled in school, that can end up counting against your ability to get those public benefit programs. And I'm sure the colleges would be able to speak to that in more detail, but certainly this overlapping connection. In fact, the bill moving through the Senate also is trying to enable people who are receiving Apple Health. So students in Apple Health, for them to also be determined automatically eligible for Washington College Grant as well. So it's a new area, and I would say kind of along the lines of the myriad experiences and challenges that people are facing, whether it's like, you know, I lost my job and I've been on unemployment. Like, we're trying to connect more with those other programs and those other state and or federal resources, so that we don't have to have people file another form, set their income all over again, and streamline our eligibility, like kind of stacking along that. So I don't know if I answered any of your questions, but.
Well, no, it's really interesting. So your grant, though, the grant that you're talking about, is not reported as income for Apple. Is that what you're saying too? Or do you know?
Well, I don't factually know how it relates to the Apple healthcare, but it's not income. It's a grant award that is, for the most part, will cover your tuition and fees. So it's just going to go straight to the college. In some scenarios, a student may pocket some of the money to help with transportation, books, things like that. But in those scenarios, the income would be so marginal, it wouldn't have to be, it's not income, it's a grant award from the state.
Yeah, and it's hard because when completing the FAFSA, you know, there's a lot of things you have to complete, and there is a tax form from the universities that reflect what those grants and scholarships are. So it's always been, and I'm a tax preparer, so it's kind of always been confusing for me. Like, okay, so do we report this or not report this for the FAFSA? And then how does that impact other benefits that you might be eligible for? And so both of my kids are in college right now, so I've been dealing with this as well. And I don't know. So I told my daughter, I'm like, well, apply for, she's in Utah. So I said, well, apply for state health insurance and see, because she's not insured right now.
Right.
And and also SNAP, because she's not working and she's only going to school, but she's paying for the school with student loans. So, you know, and these are the kinds of things that I know I'm experiencing. So I'm sure other people are.
Yep.
As well.
Yeah. And Washington College Grant is only available for people that are Washington residents. So it's only for Washington colleges and Washington residents. So tell your daughter to come back from Utah.
So Carol, you just put Carol, you just put something in the chat. verifying Washington.
You
grant
got it, Carol. That's the
eligibility.
bill.
Okay, I wanted to follow that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a great link on your website.
Oh, good. Oh yeah, the press release. Yeah, we just did a press release on it.
But Colleen, now that you've tossed it to me for a second,
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to put something out there, Heather. I met with the Jefferson County Food Bank's new executive director, and she's super passionate about this. And she wants to partner in different ways, and I don't think she knows this.
I would love the connection.
Okay, I'll make an introduction if you'd like.
Yeah.
Well, and I thought I put it in the chat. I don't see it now, but
Oh,
that we with the
got it.
recompete grant application that we have, that we're working on currently, we are creating what we call them prime age employment group. So, or the prime age employment gap population that are 25 to 54 years old that are not in the workforce, that if we were like the rest of the United States, those people would be. And so it's an outreach and barrier subcommittee where we are working with those community-based organizations that that work with people that are economically struggling, and we're trying to tie together what are their workforce needs, what are their workforce interests for available local jobs, and so from food banks to transportation, all that. And Amanda Christofferson is the point of contact in Jefferson that's working with me as we are doing this outreach for people, and Susie, we're all working together, but she's the primary point of contact in Jefferson, trying to pull together what are all these community-based organizations, and also then pulling in WorkSource to try to make sure that we're sharing all the different programs we have, and then try to support that with navigators through the recompete grant application.
Got it.
Yeah, we'd love to connect on that. I mean, I think what we've learned too is, again, the state could pass the best policy in the world, but if nobody knows about it, it sits on a shelf. So I loved, when we got the invite, Colleen, to come continue the conversation. Now that we've been out there and we've connected with you all to see what you're trying to do in your recompete grant, we'd love to plug in any way that it makes sense and be there to talk about ways that we could move on the statewide. I mean, assuming that our bill passes, that gives us something to then work with on the implementation side. We still will need partners to say, okay, we have to share, we've got to get a data sharing agreement. We don't expect to be able to do a massive data sharing agreement with DSHS on an entire list of SNAP people. That would be amazing, but the likely scenario is that we're going to be doing some more intentional hand-holding with key partners that really do want to share data. And one of the groups, if the superintendents are still here, is we've been trying to figure out, well, high schools have this information, CTCs have this information with BFET. So what are ways that we could even do that level of small data share that is with one or two high school institutions? And that's the kind of thing that if we needed to go after any sort of outside grant foundation money to provide additional capacity or support, we'd be really open to trying to make something like that work.
So our county, who is the lead applicant, is working on a data sharing agreement. So with Employment Security Department, because they have information on people that have are exhaustees of unemployment benefits. And they also have information on their education levels.
Yeah.
And so but ESD, as an example, won't do a data sharing agreement directly with the county. They'll do one with Wazoo. And then, but Wazoo wants to charge us $100,000 to analyze it until we, for 2 months. So, and then we have reporting requirements as well with recompete. So it's, it's very data intensive.
Yeah.
And we, in order to identify where are these people that are not, where do we have the highest concentrations of people that are not in the workforce? We really need really geographically specific data. If the majority of them are in Forks and we find out it's childcare is a barrier, if we create childcare opportunities in Port Angeles or Port Townsend, that's not going to help them.
Sure.
So anyway, we are really trying to identify where these people are, what their barriers are, what their interests are, but also we don't have enough good paying jobs in our 2 counties for the people that are not in the workforce. We've got between the 2 counties, 10,000 people aged 25 to 54 that are not in the workforce. If we were like the rest of the United States, we'd have 6,700, 6,300, excuse me. So we have 2,700 too many people that are not in the labor force. And that in and of itself is shown statistically to create economic distress and persistent poverty. So that's the overall theme, is trying to get us to the national standard.
Yeah. And remind me, you all are now a finalist, but is there one other step for recompete still?
So yes, we did receive $500,000 on a strategic development grant to help us further prepare for phase 2 application that's due April 25th.
Okay.
And there were 566 applications across the United States, and we are one of 22 finalists. But they're going to take that down to 4 to 8 finalists. And so there's just such a lot of work to do between now and April 25th.
Got it. Okay. And then how much is the total award that you could get after it?
50 million.
Not junk change.
No, not pocket change at all.
Yeah. That's huge.
And it's over a 5-year period, and it would support 2 counties, hopefully the most underserved areas within our 2 counties, and hopefully where we have the highest concentration of people that have given up on being in the labor force and instead are, on different kind of benefits programs.
Yeah.
Solely.
So I know we're almost at time. I didn't know if you wanted me to answer, I think it was Rick's question on the goal.
Yeah, that would be great.
But that's a nice
70%.
tie into what you were just saying. We didn't forget about you, Rick. That and I think maybe somebody actually even shared the Washington Roundtable, but this is a national trend. So we're not the only state that has a statewide goal. I would say most states now have some sort of post-secondary attainment goal, or they have a talent pipeline plan, something like that, that's related to post-secondary education, but it's largely in response to where the jobs are. It's largely in response to the economic outlook that shows, if you want to earn a decent living and a sustainable wage to take care of your family and buy a house, you're going to need a college degree. You're going to need something beyond high school. And we've put out a few reports that show the difference even between an associate's degree and a 4-year degree, or the difference between a certain type of associate's degree, or the difference between a certain type of 4-year degree. So there's layers on this kind of value of the credential that we are, I think, starting to engage more in that conversation. But the ultimate statewide goal has really been around, we need people to get something after high school It's beyond a high school diploma. And that allows for then that diverse conversation of, you know, you don't have to do it right away. It doesn't have to be a master's degree. It could look like this, but for people on the ground that are working directly with either traditional K-12 students or working with, again, people that have just not gotten the 4-year degree to understand that value in terms of their earnings over time. That's really where this came from, was about, we know that most of the jobs are going to require something like that.
I guess I'm curious about like who establishes the goal, and then why 70? Like what leads to that specific number? Why isn't it 100, or why isn't it 60, or what's behind all that? Because I mean, it sounds like that goal is central to everything you do. So I'm just curious, like, where did it come from? Who decides that?
Yeah. Well, again, I can follow up. I don't know if I could find it that fast to put in the chat, but there's a group called the Lumina Foundation that is been investing in post-secondary education for a while. They did some analysis on this to look at states. So I would say it was a combination of that. And then if you've ever read the Center for Education and Work out of Georgetown, they were kind of one of the beginning projection economic forecasting to help states actually go into detail about how many people do you have in your state? What's the industry? What are the types of jobs in your state? Forecasting that out from Labor Department. And so it is.
Yeah. Can I just interrupt real quick? I just mean, who in the state? Like, is it you that sets the goal, or is it the state legislature that sets? Who sets the
No,
goal?
it's not in legislation. It's a combination of our council and the governor.
Okay, got it. That's what I was just like, who decided that? So awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And I would just say, again, the Washington Roundtable and others have kind of chipped in, because our council has 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges, K-12. It has more of a coalition instead of just like a state agency.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I'm a huge proponent of higher ed. I just am like, where did that number come from?
Sure.
It's a random number that's out there. So, yeah.
So
Awesome.
Heather,
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. We have about 5 more minutes, and I would love to, talk briefly about apprenticeship programs that are really valuable. There's 2 components, of course, and not saying this for your use. I know you know all about them, but that there's like classroom work, and then there's on-the-job training. Mm-hmm. And out of 700 plus registered bonded contractors, we have about a dozen that are union. Outside of that, all the rest, the vast majority, are non-union. And so with registered apprenticeship, there's union apprenticeship programs and non-union. And so the entity that runs non-union programs is CITC, the Center for Industrial Training Center, Construction Industry Training Center. That's what it is. And so they, to create a classroom environment is very capital intensive. And now there's a move afoot, really pushing for registered apprenticeships and expanding requirements there. But we don't have them up here. We don't have them by and large in Clallam and Jefferson counties. So when kids graduate from school, or if the high school counselors are saying, yes, you should consider apprenticeships, what we're saying is, yes, you should move away. You have a viable skill set, and we think you should move and go to, the I-5 corridor, because, there's just not the training opportunities here. And that's something Susie's been working on. And, it's just a real challenge and unions are very influential in the legislature, and they're making more and more progress to expand their programs. But it's really an equity issue, because we don't have the critical mass in rural communities. And it's not just us, it's across the state. I hear it all the time from the other partner organizations like mine, that we don't have access to those programs. And so if they want to attend those, they need to go to the I-5 corridor. And then if they if they go to a union program, there aren't union companies out there. So they live and work, there.
Yeah. I mean, we don't administer. Our role with registered apprenticeships has been predominantly focused on the financial aid that goes to the student.
Mhm.
So I have a background in running a workforce board, and I think that there's a growing trend with Career Connect Washington in which WSAC may have a larger role, that it may make sense for another conversation offline, Colleen, for us to go into this. And I have some thoughts on it, but as an agency right now, we have no real role in supporting that expansion of registered apprenticeships. I think that's in the future, in the very near future, that we will have more of a role with it. And I don't know if folks remember, there was a bill that passed a few years ago that has WSAC contracting out with a Ruckelshaus Center at WSU to align post-secondary education credentials and registered apprenticeships. That is actually kicking off next week. So it is top of mind, I think, for many, given the Washington College Grant, given that our state financially does cover registered apprenticeships. But back to an equity perspective is like not even knowing the availability or the participation and how diverse are those folks? How do people get in? I think there's a lot that we're trying to learn about registered apprenticeships as a viable pathway. And then if it is not a viable pathway in terms of access, that I think, we are starting to have more conversations with Commerce and L&I, who, has more of a role in the registered apprenticeship realm. So I don't know what your local conversations are like in connection to like L&I, for example, but I'm happy to do a side conversation afterwards to talk about it a little bit.
That would be great. Yeah. And we've had lots of conversations with L&I, trying to explain to them we have a lobbyist that Josh Weiss, who's been trying to explain the barriers, and got basically nowhere last year. And what we asked for this year is for L&I, through their arts program, apprenticeship registration and training system, to show a map generally of where do these apprentices live.
Yeah.
Because you can look right now and say, where does one person live if you put in their name, but you cannot, there's no like overall these are the, here's a heat map basically of where people live and where they don't, where are the gaps, what communities don't have any, and that the unions didn't want that, and that was it was a bill, House Bill 717, and that was taken out of that House bill. And anyway, so and that's just a question about transparency.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really, and two different things starting this July 1st, any government contract that's more than $2 million has to have 15% of the labor hours going to apprentices. And then the following year it drops to 1.5 million. The next year it's 1 million. So the vast majority of our government capital projects will have to be awarded to entities in the I-5 corridor.
Interesting.
Because we don't have them here because we don't have programs here.
Yeah.
So it's going to harm our economy even further.
So essentially, Heather, we're just trying to tell everyone who listened, thinking that maybe
this is a problem.
Connect the dots, because a lot of legislators don't understand this, and as WSAC is trying to do really good work understanding how rural communities communities are different. Just have this piece of knowledge in the mix, and who knows when it might come
Yeah.
out in the conversation you're in that we're not in. We're just trying to get everyone aware, because just so many people don't understand why this doesn't work over
Yeah.
here.
Colleen, let's do a follow-up conversation on that. And then I know we're over time, but I'm putting in the chat also our regional challenge grant letter of interest. It is not 50 million. This opportunity is significantly smaller, but I know, Susie, you're aware of this, and just wanted to make sure that was on folks' radar, because this is our state effort at supporting regional partnerships around these post-secondary pathways. And that you'll see, and the LOI, there is a particularly kind of newer focus that we're hoping to see applications focus on adult population. That is, I think, a better alignment with the region that you all are in. So just making sure that's on the radar if it's not already.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks,
Susie's
Heather.
done a lot of work on that already, and I hope she'll be able to lead it for our area.
Yep, that's the plan. I'm pulling together community leaders, and I think we'll be able to put together a competitive application.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Heather. And we'll send this out to some folks that, and it'll be a resource for people going forward. So thank
Yeah,
you so
great.
much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Happy to follow up, and always here for any additional discussion. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Heather.
All right. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye,
That was
everybody.
great.